Hey, good evening, everybody. Wherever you are in the world, hope you're having a fantastic day. I'm here with Frank, who Charlie Kirk described as a mentor, a friend. I've watched them debate on the internet, both absolute power speakers. Frank's got a military background from the Navy, and he was present when the tragedy happened. And I cannot imagine, being so close to someone and something so bloody disturbing and out the blue to happen. So, my heart goes out to you. And just to set the stage a bit then, before we get into all of this, huge thank you for coming on firstly. And how did your relationship with Charlie Kirk start?
Thank you, Shaun. Yeah, it started back in 2020 when he emailed our ministry and said he had been watching my videos and they were helpful to him, and he wanted to get to know me. And so I called him up, and then we just kind of hit it off as friends. And he invited me to just about every event that he had. And in the summer of 2025, last summer, I was meeting with him on several occasions just to help him get ready for his tour, his college tour, because I had been speaking at colleges for about 20 years. I years ago wrote a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And so I present that on college campuses and then take questions. And he wanted the few things that I knew that he didn't know, he wanted to know. I mean, it can be hard to mentor somebody smarter than you, but not with Charlie, because the only thing that exceeded his intellect was his humility. So we had met on 4 occasions in Phoenix. I live on the East Coast, but he was out in Phoenix. And so I would go out there and we would meet for a couple of days and just try and sharpen one another on hard problems, hard questions we might get on a college campus related to Christianity or evidence for Christianity, or moral issues or cultural issues or political issues. And so the reason I was with him the day he was murdered was because we were together the previous 2 days, and he said, "Hey, why don't you just come with me to the first event of the college tour?" I said, "Great, let's do it." So I was standing about 25 feet from him when he was shot. And some of you may know, because it's on our YouTube channel, that about 5 days after that, I explained what happened. I was in the car with him, taking him to the hospital. And but he was killed instantly, Shaun. I mean, when he was in the car, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking right past me into eternity. His eyes were fixed. So the doctors later said, if he had been shot in the operating room, we couldn't have saved him. So he was killed instantly. So the only saving grace is that he didn't suffer.
Right. And in one of your interviews, you said, coming from the military, you have a certain discipline for when something happens that's really heavy like that. Could you just describe what was your psychodynamics as this was happening?
Well, I always feared that somebody would try and take a shot at Charlie just because how effective he was. And when we got to that venue that day, Shaun, I mean, it was unbelievable how many people were there, and they were really close. And I mean, it's like a huge festive rally, and there were just people everywhere. In fact, when we walked under that overhang that we were kind of under, you looked up and there were just people like 2 stories up on a walkway above us, and they were just everywhere. There were thousands of people there, and they were there to hear a Q&A. He wasn't even giving a speech. He was just answering questions. And his security team only had jurisdiction around him. They had to rely on university police and the city police for coverage outside of that general area in which he was, in which we were. And I've seen the text. I think it was from the university police that said, "We got the roofs." No, you didn't have the roofs. You didn't. Somebody was negligent. I hope somebody's charged with negligence, because that's what it was. It's quite obvious. In fact, coming into that event, we got some footage. I originally thought it was drone footage, but now in retrospect, there were people, as I say, 2 stories above us who could have just had a phone looking down. Anyway, we had footage hour before the event that Charlie got on his phone, and there were so many people there already. And I said to him, looking at the footage, I said, Charlie, I don't like this place. There are too many buildings. But he just shrugged it off because he was brave. And he knew that if you want to love people, you've got to expose yourself to a certain extent. You can't be completely safe in every case. And so we went in there, and everybody said they had security, but they didn't. His team had him secure, but they couldn't control somebody 100, 200 yards away. That was somebody else's jurisdiction.
So if you were setting that event up, then what differences would you have done?
Well, if Charlie insisted on being outdoors, I certainly would have ensured that there were people on the roofs, just like in Butler, PA with Donald Trump. I mean, that was an obvious breakdown. There's a roof building 125 yards from you, and there's nobody on it. I mean, we have security now when we go to college campuses as a result of what happened to Charlie. Even on indoor events, some of these police departments are going, it's not going to happen on our campus. They have people standing on the roofs with rifles. I mean, and I don't have nearly as high profile as Charlie. People are taking it serious now. They should have taken it serious from the beginning, and apparently they didn't. Somebody definitely was negligent, and I don't know who that is, other than the text seemed to have come from the university police.
So what was he like as a person when he was off the camera?
Same as he was on the camera. I mean, he was just very gregarious. He was a sponge. He was a type A personality, meaning he wanted to get a lot done in a short period of time. You know, Shaun, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. It's not time management, it's self-management. And Charlie was amazing at how well he could manage himself to get multiple things done. He was a multitasker, and he was always present. I mean, he was always somebody that was somebody you could rely on to engage on almost any issue. And he was very deliberate. He wrote his goals down. He obviously built an amazing organization. I mean, he started this thing when he was 18, 18 years old. And by the time he was assassinated, his organization was comprised of about 1,000 people. The money that he raised each year was over $100 million. And it was all donated money. I mean, he was a man of enormous charisma, enormous direction, and he wanted to get people to realize that God exists. You are not him. Jesus came to save us from our sins. By trusting in him, you're not only forgiven, but given his righteousness, because we're all fallen. We all need a savior. And he also wanted to ensure that his country went in the right direction. But for him, he said this just a month before he died, that for him, politics was peanuts compared to Jesus. He always said politics is not the most important thing we do, but it helps us do the most important thing we do. Because most countries don't have the kind of freedoms we have in the West, because politically they've ruled it out. There's no First Baptist Church of Tehran. There's no Calvary Chapel of Mecca. There's no Roman Catholic Church of Cairo. They don't allow that over there. There may be old ones there, but not new ones. They politically, they've ruled it out, Shaun. And I fear for your country more than mine right now, because Islam wants to impose Sharia law on the entire world. And unless the migration situation changes in Europe, eventually you'll all be under Sharia law, unless something changes. And by the way, Mark Stein recognized this 20 years ago. He's a political commentator here in the US. He wrote a book called America Alone. This was 20 years ago, and it's coming true, unfortunately. So,
yeah, the government policies here have got Keir Starmer as the most despised prime minister in the history of polling. And this situation with Mandelson's almost got Keir Starmer getting thrown out. So, the public are sick of the policies of this government. And other governments that have led to, you know, disasters here in the UK. So yeah, you're quite right. It's like a global phenomenon.
Yeah, and look, we owe our existence to you, Shaun, in the United States. I mean, we came from you, so we want to make sure that our brothers and sisters across the pond have the same freedoms we enjoy over here. So, you know, J.D. Vance was right when he went to, I think it was Germany last February, about a year ago. And he talked about the fact that you can't allow this to continue if you're going to have a free society moving forward. And by the way, the last conversation, well, let me put it another way. At night in Phoenix, when I was in Phoenix with Charlie, we used to go on these walks after he put his kids down. We'd walk the streets of Phoenix, Scottsdale area at night, always with a 300-pound armed bodyguard with us. And we would talk about any issue that Charlie wanted to talk about. And the last walk we had was September 8th, which was the Monday night before he was murdered on Wednesday. And the three issues we talked about were these, Shaun. Islam. He was worried that Islam, not micro-Islam, you know, your neighbor who's a Muslim who you love and there's no issue with. He was worried about macro-Islam, the idea that Islam as a geopolitical movement was going to impose Sharia law wherever it went. And the problem is that while you may have very nice friends who are Muslims, when the more radical elements take over a society, the more moderate elements don't resist them. And this is 1,400 years of history. And we also talked about this idea of people talk about Islamophobia, which in my view is a bogus term because Islam is not a race. There are Muslims from every race and ethnic group. Islam is a geopolitical ideology. And so to say that you're against a political view is not prejudice at all. It's just wisdom if it's a political view that's going to take your freedoms away. So we want Muslims to know the truth. We want Muslims to be people that love freedom. So Charlie was very worried about that. And we talked about that at great length. The second issue we talked about that night was the resurrection of Jesus. Because look, if two facts are true, if God exists and Jesus rose from the dead, then Christianity is true. So we were talking about the evidence for the resurrection. Did it really happen? Is it just a fairy tale? Is it a story, or did it really happen? So we were talking about the evidence for that. And then the third issue we were talking about, which was on his heart, where it was in our country anyway, in America, I don't know what it is like in the UK, but the younger generation, his generation, say people in their 20s, early 30s, their goals aren't really to get married and have a family anymore. In fact, right after the last election in America, the men that voted for Trump in that category, their number one goal was to get married. But the women were their goal to get married was like number 5. And among the Harris voting women, it was 12 out of 13. And so Charlie was trying to figure out, how can we get particularly the women to embrace marriage like the men appear to be embracing marriage? And in retrospect, I realized after that conversation that Charlie was concerned about the 3 institutions that Christians believe God established: government, the family, and the church. Those are the big things that were established by God according to Christians. And those are the 3 things that he was concerned about. He was a big picture thinker, Shaun. He was somebody that knew what the big issues were, and he wanted to concentrate on those issues rather than the small issues.
And which of those concerned him the most?
I think they all did, because in particular, you might say the family might rise to the top, because if the biological 2-parent family doesn't survive and flourish, nothing else really matters. You're not going to have a civilization unless the home is secure, unless the home has a essence to it that can then build a greater society. It all starts with the bricks of the biological 2-parent family.
So do you think these are all symptomatic of how certain countries rise, like the British Empire, the sun never sets, and then there's a decline, and these things set in during the decline phase?
I'm more apt to think it might be that, Shaun, but it might also be a cycle that we recognize in the book of Judges in the Old Testament. It's about a 350-year period where they didn't have a king, but what happened to them is they were following the truth, they were following God, and then they got real prosperous, and then they began to forget about God, and they fall into judgment, they'd fall into sin, and then they'd repent and they'd come back and they'd then begin to follow God again. And then the cycle would occur again. They'd get prosperous, they'd forget. So this cycle goes on, I think, and it happens to all civilizations eventually. I think the Roman Empire probably fell more from within rather than without. They had a degradation of their own moral values. And when that degrades, everything else degrades with it. The whole civilization comes down. That's why the family is really the foundation of any civilization. It starts with those bricks. So it might be what's going on here in America and perhaps the UK. And unless we reverse course, we're going to wind up subjugated to a world religion that means submission. That's what Islam means, as you know.
Yeah, one of my favorite books is Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see parallels then, like the proliferation of bureaucracy, corruption, a la Epstein files, etc., in the present day that hark back to what happened with Rome?
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun, as Solomon said. Yeah, it's still it's the same human nature, Shaun, as you know, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to perfect human nature unless we bow our knee, and too many of us don't want to do that.
But it seems that as one nation declines, the power center shifts globally.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So do you think that the power is shifting from west to east, and that's part of what's causing these tensions?
I think it's probably partially that, but it's the West's own inability to fight for its own values, to fight for Western values. We have this odd multicultural idea that all cultures are essentially the same, when in fact we know they're not. They're not the same. Some cultures are superior to others because some moral principles are superior to others. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. Those are moral values that are enshrined in our First Amendment to our Constitution that are superior to, say, religious intolerance, and are superior to saying, no, the government gets to tell you what you're going to think, and you don't have any redress, you don't have any freedom of speech, you don't have any freedom of assembly, you don't have any freedom of press. So unless we realize that our own values that ultimately come from the Judeo-Christian ethic, unless we realize that those values are superior and we're not going to defend them, then these other values from the East are going to come in and say, no, you've got to live under our dictatorship, our Sharia law dictatorship.
But is it reversible, though? In The Wealth of the Nations, Adam Smith wrote that the country that conquers the other countries, the warrior country, will get bloated and effeminized on the wealth, and the other poorer countries who are ready and warrior-like will then take over. But is that cycle possible to stop? And how does that play out when you've got nuclear weapons?
Yeah, well, I don't think nuclear weapons are going to prevent a group that comes to a country, does not assimilate, outpopulates the group, and then basically just muscles them out of power through the voting booth. I mean, that's even happening in some cities here in America, like Dearborn, Michigan, where they have the Muslim call to prayer in a allegedly free society, because they're just outpopulating the Christian population or even the secular population, and they're using our own democratic principles to basically nullify democracy.
So what's the solution for that?
Well, I personally think the solution is for me as a Christian, is always telling people the truth about the fact that, again, God exists. We are not him. We've fallen. We need a savior. Jesus paid for our sins. Trusting in him, loving God, and then loving your neighbor is the solution. And by the way, love doesn't mean approval. You know, even in that great passage that the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13, that everybody reads at their wedding, whether they're religious or not, they read this. You know, it's 1 Corinthians 13 about love. Paul says this: love does not rejoice in wrongdoing. Love rejoices in the truth. Love always protects. Love always perseveres. Love does not mean approval. And every parent knows this. I mean, if you have a teenager, a 13-year-old, if you approve of everything your 13-year-old wants to do, are you loving? No, you need to stand in the way of any evil or harm that person, your teenager, wants to do. And so love doesn't just acquiesce to evil. Love stands against evil. In fact, the most loving thing Winston Churchill did was resisting Hitler, because you don't love people by allowing evil to overrun them. You love them by drawing a firm line in the sand and saying, no, you're not coming any further. In fact, we're going to repel you out of France. We're going to repel you out of the nations that you subjugated, because we love the people in those nations. So, I mean, thank God for Winston Churchill. We wouldn't even have a civilization. We might all be speaking German right now.
Yeah, my grandfather was rescued by the Americans, actually, after the Battle of Tunisia. He was left for dead after fighting the Nazis. And I wouldn't exist right now if you guys hadn't saved my grandfather. And then he went back to the UK and got my grandmother pregnant with my dad.
Which battle was this, and where was it, Sean?
The Battle of Tunisia with the Nazis.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Wow.
in North Africa. He was left for dead. He came home with holes in his legs from all the shrapnel.
Man.
And the Americans rescued him. Yeah.
Well, that's just it. We have such a joint history together. Winston Churchill, in my view, the greatest figure of the 20th century. Without him, who knows what would have happened?
I know, and look what we've got in here in the UK in comparison now. Anyway, the viewers are saying we're going off on a geopolitical philosophical tangent here.
We are.
So let's get back to.
Okay.
All right, so we've got 1,000 watching across all the platforms. I'm here with Frank Turek, and if you want to support him, add his channel or his links. They're all in the live chat right now, the website, YouTube, and if you're watching on replay, they're in the description box. So one of the common questions then being asked is about Turning Point USA, how that has evolved in recent months, if you think it's going in the right direction, etc.
Well, they're all friends of mine, so you might not get the most objective, the most objective take, but I know all those people personally, and they are some of the finest people I've ever met. Now, of course, Erica Kirk is in a period of mourning, and rightfully so. It's got to be difficult to get up every day and do what she does, but she does. And now she's not Charlie Kirk, she's Erica Kirk, so she's not going to be the same person. But I think she's doing an inspirational job of keeping the organization together and continuing to do what they've always done, which is to put out content all the time, to have these big conferences, to go to colleges. I substituted. Well, actually, Charlie and I were supposed to go to UC Berkeley. I call it UC Berkeley. Back in November, of course, Charlie was murdered 2 months prior to that, but I went with comedian Rob Schneider and my friend Peter Boghossian. Peter Boghossian is an atheist. He and I don't agree on the God question, but Peter Boghossian, who wrote the book A Manual for Creating Atheists, believes that we need to come together to save Western civilization. In fact, he's in France right now, and he just sent me a text about 15 minutes ago. He's in France right now interviewing people on the future of civilization there. And so he was at Berkeley with me and with Rob. And so that college tour continues, even though Charlie was the headliner of him. She's keeping that going. So, and they're very well attended.
So when you go and speak at one of these locations, then after being present with what happened to Charlie, doesn't that create a different atmosphere for you now? You must be like having eyes in the back of your head, thinking something else could happen to you.
Sure. Well, we have security, and our events have always been indoors. It's much harder to control an outdoor event. Our events are indoors, so most of the time people are going through metal detectors and that kind of thing. But look, if something ever happens to me, okay, I think I know where I'm going. So I obviously I don't want to die prematurely, but you know, it's a history of Christianity. Jesus said, if they hated you, they're going to hate me. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. You know, he said, if they hated me, they're going to hate you. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. Paul said, anyone who lives a faithful life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. We don't wish it on anybody. We don't wish it on ourselves, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop doing what we're doing. Of course, we're going to take precautions. It's not just for my safety, but for the safety of the audience too. You know, we've had some crazy things going on here in America. We seem to have a shooting every other day in some public place somewhere. It's sad, but there's a lot of animosity out there. There's a lot of people that are unhappy and think the way out of that is to murder other people. And of course, that's never the solution, but that's what's going on.
So statistically, does America have a disproportionate amount of these shootings compared to other countries in the world?
Well, certainly more so than the UK, but you don't have a Second Amendment that we have here, which allows weapons, supposedly, according to the Constitution, to protect ourselves from a despotic government. That's what it was for, not to go hunting. Of course, you can go hunting, but it was to protect ourselves from a despotic government. And so Charlie himself said that's one of the prices of a Second Amendment, is that you will have these incidents occur. And is there any way of really stopping that in terms of, can you take weapons away? It'll never happen in America. There are more weapons in America than there are people. So we have an ethos here, or an ethos here, that it says you ought to be able to defend yourself in your own home. Now, will some people take advantage of that and illicitly use that? Yeah, that's true. But that's just one of the prices of being able to defend yourself in your own home. I don't know how our stats compare to other developed countries with weapons, but I mean, these kind of things do happen all over the world.
So when you see someone like Tyler, then, you know, do you start to contemplate what are the root causes that create somebody to do something like this?
Yes, you think that so many people are getting propagandized on the internet. And look, it can happen both ways, right? You can have people go too far right and too far left. The social media algorithms tend to make us get involved in echo chambers. I mean, you know, when you type something into YouTube, you know, you're going to see whatever you typed in for the next few days. They're going to keep throwing videos at you that are of a similar content. So you can easily get propagandized by short videos and misinformation, and think the right way forward then is to somehow take out the oppressor, because apparently this person you've been led to believe is an oppressor. You know, it's part of the critical theory idea here that there's only two kinds of people out there, oppressors and oppressed, and anybody who's an oppressor deserves to die by this logic. And that might have been the case with Tyler Robinson. I don't know. The trial, can you believe this, Shaun? The trial is really not supposed to begin in earnest until next January.
Wow.
There's a pretrial hearing in May. I don't know why this stuff takes so long. A pretrial hearing in May, but the real trial doesn't begin, I've been told anyway, till next January.
So you've got a viewer question here. Do you think Tyler did it by himself? And I would add to that, or, you know, at a minimum, perhaps, do you think he was encouraged by people online, or?
Yeah, I don't know enough yet to know that. I'm not going to speculate. And the reason I'm not going to speculate is because too many people are speculating, and they are creating problems for people that really are innocent. You know, I've even gotten like death threats. Like, people think I'm involved. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But I'm worried more about, I mean, there are certain people who are suggesting that Erica is somehow behind this, or his staff at TPUSA, Charlie's staff, which is ludicrous, number one. Number two, if that were the case, you got to have really good evidence in order to suggest that. You don't just casually suggest someone is guilty of murder without having really good evidence. And number three, it would also entail the unbelievable idea that Charlie was such a bad judge of character that all the people around him that he handpicked all wanted him dead. That it takes more faith to believe that than some crazed gunman just decided that he didn't like what Charlie was saying and wanted to kill him. Whether he was working with somebody else, I don't know yet. The trial's going to bring all that out. And by the way, in America anyway, I don't know how it works here in the UK, but the friends that I have in law enforcement will tell you that the prosecution never reveals their case before the trial. At least they only do so at a minimal level, because if they do, they're going to, number one, taint the jury. Number two, they're going to tip off the defense. Number three, they may create a situation where they can't even use a certain witness. And that actually happened in the famous O.J. Simpson trial in America about 30 years ago, when the prosecution said, oh, we have witness X. I can't even remember her name, but then the media went after witness X. They offered her a whole bunch of money for her story. She took the money, and then she was invalidated as a witness. So the job of the prosecution is not to quell internet conspiracy theories. The job of the prosecution is to convict the real killer. Now, I always tell people, if you don't think Tyler Robinson did this, let me ask you a question. Number one, why did his parents turn him in? And number two, if he's not guilty, why aren't his parents screaming he's not the real guy? And number three, why has a judge said we need to not give him bail and keep him in jail if there's no evidence that he did it? So you'd have to get over at least those three objections to say he had nothing to do with it.
All right. So you got another viewer question here. Are you aware whether or not that Charlie received credible death threats before, this happened?
I don't know about the day before his murder, but he got death threats all the time. And in fact, back in May, I texted him after there was political violence here in the US. I said, Charlie, tell me you've increased your security detail. He texted me back, quote, yes, big time. They want me dead. And they wasn't defined. I think he might just mean his opponents on the left. But that's all I know.
So do you think he was having premonitions then of his own death?
I don't know if he imagined that, it would really happen. I thought at some point it would. I didn't know he would be killed, but I thought somebody would try and shoot him. In fact, when the shot went off, as I said, I was 25 feet from him. I was actually FaceTiming my son and daughter-in-law at the time. And I don't remember this, but my daughter-in-law said, your first three words were, no, no, no. And then I took a step toward him, but his team was already there. And then I ducked for a second because I thought, well, maybe there's more shots. And then after they had started to take him to the car, I just ran around the other side of the tent and went to the car with them. And that's how I got into the SUV. But my initial thought was, okay, he's shot. Let's hope we can save him. Let's hope he's okay. Maybe they didn't catch him. Maybe it's not a fatal wound. But after we got in the car, I knew intellectually he was gone, but I didn't want to believe it. So I tried to CPR on him. We were trying to stop the bleeding. His feet were hanging out the door because he's too tall. We couldn't even shut the back right door. And we're yanking and banking to the hospital. We're in a regular SUV. There's no police lights or anything. We're just beeping the horn, screaming through intersections, trying to get him to the hospital. But we just did what we thought we had to try. That's all we had to do. And when we got to the hospital, we did get a pulse because the doctor said he was so young and healthy. You can start somebody's heart even though they're dead. And that's what happened.
Oh my God. Was he unconscious on that journey?
Yeah, he was gone. As I say, he wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed.
Wow. You got another question here about, was it his usual security that he had on the day, or had there been any changes to security?
Not that I know of. His main security guy, Dan Flood, had been with him for 10 years. And he was employed by TPUSA, and then they would hire out to other security folks. But the guys that were with him that day had been with him for a long time. So Brian is one guy, and Blake, and I'm trying to remember all their names now, but there were 5 or 6 of them. I was the only non-security guy in the car. I just forced my way into the car because he was like a son to me. I just, you know, your son got shot, you wouldn't stay behind, right? You'd go, I'm getting in that car. So.
Marie's asking whether you've had any contact with Charlie's sister or parents.
Yes, at the funeral, the day after. In fact, the day of, they got them there. We wound up in a hotel, and I guess it was somewhere in Salt Lake City. And his parents and sister came in, and the next day we're at a funeral home. So yes, I did talk to them. Lovely people.
Another viewer, and our heart goes out to them. And another viewer is asking, is it usual for there not to be an ambulance on the site?
I don't know the protocol. That was the first time I was with Charlie on a college campus. But you wouldn't think you would need an ambulance. I mean, you know, and if the ambulance was there, it wouldn't have made a difference. As that doctor said, if he was shot in the operating room, we couldn't have saved him.
Are there any conspiracy theories or claims around Charlie that you would like to, debunk?
Yeah, all of them.
All of them.
Yeah, because conspiracy theories are just that, conspiracy theories. You need facts, and we don't have facts. One of the reasons the Bible says you need 2 witnesses is to prevent this kind of thing. Now, in our modern age, of course, we have other means of discovering what happened in the past. You can have DNA evidence and that kind of thing. But, you know, obviously there's this lady, Candace Owens, who used to be a friend of Charlie, who I think is doing atrocious things, especially bringing up things that are without substantiation and dragging Erica through a very difficult time. In fact, even insinuating she's somehow involved. Look, if you're going to suggest that, you better have really good evidence, and you don't have any good evidence. I mean, I haven't seen her recent things, but in the few months following the murder, she was talking about the Egyptians being involved, the Israelis being involved, Trump being involved, TPUSA being involved, just about everybody. She threw like everybody up against the wall. And let's see if we can get one of these to stick, which, look, by just pure reason, the FBI is involved. All these people are involved. You think all these entities would coordinate some sort of murder? For what reason? You're going to get Egypt and Israel to work together to murder a guy in America? Really? I mean, you got to have a lot of faith, a lot of blind faith to believe that. I mean, these are contradictory theories, and she's just throwing everything up against the wall. And it's and her, you know what her evidence has been? I had a dream. Charlie came to me in a dream. Oh, really? Okay. You think that's going to fly in a court of law? You think that's going to convict somebody? A dream? I had a premonition. I had this. I had that. I mean, this is slander, is what it is. And according to Christian theology, both Jesus and the apostles called Satan a murderer, a liar, an accuser, and a slanderer who creates confusion. Shaun, we had a murder. What have we had since then? Lies, accusations, slander, and confusion. Sounds like textbook spiritual warfare to me.
You got a few people asking if you would ever debate Candace on these things.
If she had any evidence to debate, I mean, what are we going to talk about? Speculation? you can piece together, I could say this, Shaun, and it's plausible. I could say the person that really killed, and I don't believe this. Let me just say right off the bat, this is just a hypothetical. I could say Candace was behind his murder. You know why? Because Candace was upset. She was in love with Charlie, and Charlie didn't pick her. And then she got a little crazy, and then she started saying weird things. So Charlie no longer invited her to the big venues. And then she was jealous. And so she actually hired the hit out on Charlie. And she thought that after Charlie was gone, then TPUSA would come back to her and invite her to be the leader. Is that possible? Sure, that's possible. Is it plausible? It's plausible. Is there any evidence for it? None. It would be completely libelous for me to even say that in a serious way because I don't have any evidence. Now, the details could fit that concocted story, but that's not the way we investigate murders. It's not the way, we might investigate possibilities, but we don't make them public and say, oh, this is true. And that's essentially what she's been saying in reverse, that people at TPUSA had him murdered. Israel did. Trump did. The FBI did. Egypt had something to do with it. I mean, come on. It's very entertaining, right? Clicks keep going up.
We've got a few questions have come in from Shane. One of them is, what do you think is the biggest risk right now to Charlie's legacy? Internal division, outside pressure, or mission drift?
I don't know. I kind of think Charlie's legacy is pretty secure because there's nothing that can change what he accomplished in his 31 years. But if we want to continue to do what he does, first of all, nobody's going to replace Charlie Kirk, right? We're all unique individuals. He was a once-in-a-generation leader. But there are people that can do some of the things that he did, maybe not in one person, but collectively. And so trying to train people to be better able to answer questions, whether it's related to political issues, cultural issues, religious issues, evidence for the faith, that kind of thing. We can raise people up to do that. But Charlie was a unique individual. Whether you agreed with him or not, you have to admit he was a very gifted individual as a leader. He got people behind him. And in our country, it would be unlikely that this past election would have gone the way it did without Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, he was a dynamic speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real pleasure to have you with us. You knew Charlie well. Based on the man you saw behind the scenes, do you think he had the qualities to one day serve as president?
He was going to be president. He would be really coy when I'd say that to him. But I would say the ticket in 2028 is going to be Vance Kirk, and he would just smile, and publicly he would say, I would only do it if my country needed me. But I think he was ultimately headed there. But look, God is sovereign. Things happen. He allows things to happen. There's always a ripple effect. Always a ripple effect to everything that happens, good and bad. We can't always trace those ripples, but God can. And Charlie, I mean, from his perspective as a Christian, never in the history of the world has a funeral service turned into an evangelistic event where all these politicians were talking about Jesus and what we call the gospel, that Christ came to save us by grace because of his sacrifice, where you had 75,000 people in the room. There were 30 or 40,000 in the building next to us. There were 100 million people watching online. And the last number I heard as of November, 1.2 billion people saw some of that memorial service. And I get testimonies all the time from people either in person or emailing me saying, I became a Christian because of Charlie Kirk. I'm rededicating my life to Christ because of Charlie Kirk. I'm getting my life in order because of Charlie Kirk. I have a mission now because of Charlie Kirk. I am Charlie Kirk. If you were to bring Charlie Kirk back today and Shaun, you would ask him, if 100 people came to faith and stepped into eternity because of your life and what happened to you, would you accept that? Yeah, that's what my life is about anyway, he would say. But it's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have been touched in a positive way by Charlie. So there's always a ripple effect. In Charlie's case, it wasn't a ripple, it was a tsunami.
Do you think today's college conservatives are as energized and unified as they were at the height of Charlie's influence?
And that's a good question. I think that remains to be seen. On the college events that I go to, I just did 3 last week. I have a couple next week. They're full and people appear to be engaged. And since Charlie's death, I've noticed, Shaun, that we've gone from more skeptical questions, although we still get some of those, to more, how can I help my friend to see the truth of God and Jesus and Christianity? So it's shifted from skepticism to more, we might say, evangelism, how to get people more engaged for eternity. Because the most important thing is eternity, Shaun. You and I, everybody listening, watching to us right now, we're all going to be dead in 100 years, if not sooner. I know I have this condition known as 64. I'll probably be dead in 2 decades, 3 if I'm lucky, right? Maybe sooner. Okay, I'm going to be dead a lot longer than I'm going to be alive. What's the purpose of this life? Because everyone we know, everyone we love is going to die. Everything we do is going to be forgotten. Everything we build is going to crumble. Our identity is going to die and vanish unless the resurrection of Jesus is true. If there's no eternity, there's nothing ultimately matters. No, it doesn't matter if you live as a missionary or a murderer. If there's no eternity and there's no God, we're all just going to cease to exist. What does it really ultimately matter? Whether you live as Tyler Robinson or Charlie Kirk? It doesn't, ultimately. So eternity is really the issue. And that's what Charlie devoted his life to, while also recognizing that politics is important because it affects people today. It also affects our ability to do our most important mission, and that is to tell people about the truth of Jesus.
Were there tensions or philosophical disagreements inside the organization towards the end?
Not that I know of, but I would have to answer the question obviously, because every major organization has those disagreements, right? Because we have people that have different views. But Charlie was such a charismatic leader that the direction of TPUSA reflected his vision, his values, his mission, and it still does. They're still doing, as I mentioned earlier, what he was doing and what he wanted to do.
All right, next question. Do you believe Turning Point USA still has the power to shape national elections the way it once did?
Yes, because it wasn't just about Charlie Kirk. They have a organization called TPUSA Action, which is led by Tyler Boyer. And these are people that actually chase votes, meaning they encourage, from their viewpoint, conservative voters who might not be as engaged as they should be to vote. So they actually get on the ground and they encourage these voters to get involved. And that's why President Trump won every single swing state in America in the last elections. One reason why, not the only reason why. And the state in which he got the biggest margin was your old home, Arizona, because that's where TPUSA is. They know that state like they know the back of their own hands. They know every precinct. They know every issue that goes on. So they were able to motivate several 100,000 voters in that state alone.
Wow. Do you feel a personal responsibility to guide or advise the organization now?
I do that as a friend. I'm not a part of the organization, but I speak at a lot of their events, and I just want to see them succeed. But I don't speak for them because I'm not a TPUSA employee. I'm just a friend of Charlie. I'm a friend of Erica. I'm a friend of so many people there. They've been very hospitable to me. They've invited me to every event. And when I can, I go because I believe in what they're doing. I believe that the family is important. I believe the country is important. I believe the church is important. Those are the 3 institutions God established, and they believe all those 3 things as well.
If Charlie were watching today, what do you think he would say about the current state of the conservative movement?
Well, one of the things Charlie was really good at was holding disagreements between conservatives, holding those people together. He would say, look, it's better to get 80% of what you want than 0% of what you want. So he would keep the people like Tucker Carlson, who has gone off on this anti-Israel rant for some reason, and Ben Shapiro together, right? Okay. Somehow he would figure out how to do that. That's a great loss to the conservative movement. I don't know how much that's going to affect future elections, that he's not around to do that. Maybe somebody else will rise up and do that. But he was, I mean, at 31, Charlie had so many contacts and knew so many people and was respected by so many people that, you know, he's going to be irreplaceable in that regard. But perhaps somebody else can rise up and do that. Or look, maybe these people are reasonable enough to realize, look, I'm not going to get 100% what I want in any political party or any candidate. So I'm just going to get the best that I can. And that's pretty much the way you have to vote, no matter what country you're in. You never get 100% of what you want, right?
So if Charlie would get Ben and Tucker together, do you think he would try and get you and Candace together in the same motivation?
Oh, well, first of all, yeah, and I have no problem talking to Candace. I'd be happy to talk to Candace. I don't think anything she's doing with regard to this big conspiracy theory is something that's helpful at all, though. And debating issues that have no firm foundation behind them, debating speculation is just like nailing Jello to the wall. Oh yeah, sure, that could be true, but what evidence do you have for it? You know, I mean, it's kind of futile because she seems to be unconcerned with the facts to begin with. So what's a debate going to do? You correct her on some facts, and she hasn't been concerned with facts from the get-go. She's trying to piece together stuff that doesn't have any factual connection to a murder. It's not there.
I think that is what would make it so fascinating, though, is to have, you know, the two viewpoints coming together, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I think the viewers would like to see something like that. I could tell.
Oh, sure, yeah, it would make for great clicks, but what would it resolve? You know, if people can't see that speculation is not evidence, I don't know what to do. I mean, okay, yeah, is it plausible that all these groups were involved, or is it possible? Anything's possible, but is it reasonable? And what evidence do you have for it? There was a plane that was in Utah that day. Okay. And, right? An Egyptian plane. Okay. And what does that prove? Nothing. You need more than that to come to a conclusion.
Yeah, I think from a freedom of speech perspective, it would be interesting to see how that played out, the debate. But Frank, honestly, you've come on here today, and you know you've shared this personal experience, extremely moving. I can't imagine, even with your military training, the effects that must have on you, you know, at night when you're going to bed, and I'm sure you've got PTSD from this. You would be inhuman if you didn't, and you know, going out and doing these events still, you've got your own family to think about, security concerns and stuff like that. To go out and continue to do these events, you know, it takes a hell of a lot of bravery. So, you know, we appreciate you coming on and sharing this story from the heart, you know, what you were there on the day. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the viewers?
Well, I want to thank you for having me on, Shaun, to talk about it. I would just say follow the evidence where it leads, in life in general. Because look, we all have our psychological doubts about certain things. And I tell audiences this all the time. Do you realize that your psychology will not tell you what's true outside your skull? The evidence will. And an example I typically give is that I know there's a lot of people that are afraid to get on an airplane because they think they're going to die. But what the evidence shows you is that getting on an airplane is the safest way to get anywhere statistically. You should be more afraid to get in your car than to get on an airplane. And the reason I bring that up is because people have psychological doubts about whether God exists or whether Christianity is true or whether Jesus came and died for us and took our punishment upon himself. And then by trusting in him, we're not only forgiven, but given his righteousness. People have doubts about that. Yeah, you can have doubts, but your psychology is not going to tell you the truth about those things. The evidence will. So concentrate on the evidence. Follow the evidence where it leads. We have a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which goes into that. Charlie was actually reading that book on his way back from Korea, his last trip before we went to Utah Valley University. And he highlighted that book in the book behind me, Charlie's book, Stop in the Name of God. So if you're a skeptic about this, that's fine, but give the evidence a whirl, take a look at it and see what you think.
All right, Frank, thank you for spending time with us. I'm going to close the show and let you go, and you have a great rest of your day, and good luck in your endeavors. Cheers.
God bless you, Shaun. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank. Cheers. Bye. All right, folks, if you want to support Frank, all of his links are in the description box. If you're watching on replay, he's got his own YouTube channel, and he's almost got 1 million subs on YouTube as well, like 800,000. Let me get that one in the description, in the live chat. It's in the description box already. Thank you for all of your questions. And we have got Alexander Mercuris coming on tomorrow afternoon to talk about the Epstein files. We've got Matthew Steeples coming on Thursday afternoon to talk about the Epstein files. We've got loads more guests coming in. Thank you, Shane, for arranging this interview. And if you missed the interview that we did with David Icke about the Epstein files and the deep state, then this video, when it finishes, will take you over to the David Icke interview. So yeah, definitely not one to miss. He just really breaks it all down. It's